Hi, I'm Steve Kep, co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values, and we're looking forward to hosting today's webinar. But before we do, I want to share something special we have for today's attendees. Our next monthly virtual conference is coming up Wednesday, June 16th, and it's titled The New Benefits That Employees Need and Want Today. Thanks to our partners and today's sponsor, Achievers, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those of you who've joined us today. And that's you. I'm putting a link in the chat space right now. You'll want to take advantage of this one. The regular price for our conference tickets is $149, and this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. Today, we'll be exploring the topic of how to get recognition right in a COVID-era workplace. That's an important topic. People have been remote. Now they're going to be in hybrid mode, and really kind of affirming their contributions and acknowledging their work is more important than ever to have a high level of employee engagement. So this is very well timed. Our sponsor today is Achievers. I'll tell you a bit about them. Achievers' employee voice and recognition solutions bring your organization's values and strategy to life, activate employee participation, and fuel a culture of performance to experience data-driven business results. Now, a few logistical items. This event is being recorded and will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info for you on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management. And look out for a written account of our conversation on our website at fromday1.co. Now I'd like to pass the mic over to the Achievers team.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen here. And sorry, I was having a little bit of internet trouble right before we started. As Steve mentioned, my name is Brie Harvey, and I have been at Achievers for coming on 6 years. Sorry, I'm just going to try to get my screen to share here.
Maybe I'll let you screen
Thank
share.
you. Yeah, I'm like so bad at multitasking. Matt,
yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourself while I get
I'll go
this?
first instead of making you try to sit there and suffer. So hi, everyone. Great to be here today. Super excited to be with you all. My name is Matt Tremmaglia. I lead our customer success team here at Achievers. I've been with the organization for 8 years, and I really have the opportunity and privilege to lead one of the most incredible services organizations that are very much dedicated to helping our customers build out their employee engagement and recognition strategies. When I'm not thinking about how we can better help our customers and support them, I'm chasing after my 2 daughters at 8 and 6 years old. Like many of you, I'm sure, we're doing the homeschooling, working at home dance, and doing our best to manage their screen time, although completely unsuccessfully at that, if I'm to be honest.
I love that. I wish I had someone monitoring my screen time. Are we seeing the right screen here with our lovely faces? Awesome. I'm Brie Harvey. I've been working at Achievers for 6 years. And in my current role as an employee engagement evangelist, I get to write and speak about the story that the data tells about how organizations can create high-performing cultures. And before we get into the good, I wanted to level set about the fact we're going to be referencing a lot of findings from the Workforce Institute, which is the research arm of Achievers. They're led by our amazing Chief Workforce Scientist, Dr. Natalie Baumgartner. And in addition to conducting proprietary research about emerging workplace trends, they've also spent an exorbitant amount of time analyzing Achievers' best performing customers and kind of ascertaining what makes the difference between a recognition program that does well versus one that really excels. And we're going to spend our time together kind of talking about some of those best practices in detail today. Here are some of the brands that we work with, but I did want to clarify two things. One being that all of the pillars of success we're going to talk about are universal, meaning they're applicable across all sectors. There's actually a lot of nuances that are industry specific, that are like specific per industry that we won't be addressing today. The other quick thing I wanted to be clear about is that these 10 best practices are not achievers specific. They can be applied within any recognition program and they will work, but they do require demystifying some common myths about workplace gratitude. So as we go, we'll be deconstructing some of those common misconceptions. We're going to wrap it up by prescribing the top action you can take today to be an agent of change within your organization and elevate your recognition culture. So I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is that it has been an exceedingly difficult 16 months, not just with the fear and anxiety that comes with a deadly global pandemic, but on the ongoing political polarization, the friction stemming from racial injustices, and the anxiety that comes with prolonged disruption and isolation and homeschooling. Although there are signs of recovery and healing, employee burnout and disillusionment are at an all-time high. People are ready to move on and have a fresh start. And unfortunately, that is reflected in one of the Workforce Institute findings that 50% of employees plan on actively job hunting this year. The thought of an aggressive uptick in voluntary turnover on top of everything else HR has had to deal with is unsettling. But it's good to point out that although a lot has changed within the world of work and where and how work gets done, at the end of the day, the way we're programmed as a species, our wiring as humans remains the same. And the research consistently shows that for employees to be fully bought in and do the best work of their lives, at the most fundamental level, they have to feel like they matter. They have to feel seen and valued. So it's understandable that most organizations kind of have caught on to this. And over the last couple of decades, research has accumulated from academia and consulting houses showing indisputably that recognition is the most scalable and effective way to not just boost morale and reinforce key behaviors, but impact retention, engagement, and so on. And most HR practitioners get it. Like, it's just intuitive. If you're working in an environment where your contributions are regularly acknowledged by the people around you, you're just going to be more energized to do a good job. So it makes sense that most organizations have some kind of recognition initiative in place. What's concerning, Matt, and something not enough people talk about, is that only 18% claim their investment is definitely working. And even more concerning is when you ask employees, a lot of them claim they don't feel recognized. So how would you say we could explain the disconnect?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, there's probably a few things that if we were to put our heads together, we could attribute that disconnect to, but I'll pick up on two that I think we're going to dive into. The first has to do with the fact that not all recognition is created equal. To your point, Brie, it's clear that in order for recognition to have this kind of sustaining impact on engagement, that it has to follow some specific characteristics. We're going to talk about these in much more detail today, I'm sure, but in my experience, when a company's recognition approach or their strategy is falling a little bit flat, we can find the gap related to one or more of these best practices being missing. Beyond that, the other gap that we kind of see involves missed opportunities with how organizations approach the ongoing, and I stress that, the ongoing adoption as it relates to encouraging both employee and manager usage of their recognition system. As you've mentioned, over the last 2 decades, we've implemented hundreds of recognition programs now with some of the world's most large and complex organizations. And that's given us an ability to learn firsthand what makes the difference between recognition programs that succeed versus, unfortunately, some of those that end up missing the mark. We've captured those lessons in a playbook that sort of outlines everything from program design, change management, technical considerations, and then of course that point of how to deploy ongoing strategies to keep recognition front and center within the organization. And we're pretty confident, at least based on the data and the experience, that if an organization follows these strategies, that they'll experience some of those more transformative benefits that recognition can offer.
Yeah, and I also think that there's no shame in pointing out that a lot of these steps that we've identified and continuously iterated on have been through trial and error, emphasis on error. A lot of the most valuable aha moments have stemmed from lessons learned when things didn't work out the way that we hoped. And today's discussion is more of a snapshot of the playbook, but our goal is to leave you with some actionable insights. So let's dive into our first myth, which is the notion that people want too much praise these days, especially the trophy generation. And I just don't have time or the appetite to pat you on the back every time you do your job. First of all, no one, including your younger generations, is asking for more praise just because. On the contrary, giving unfounded praise can actually be insulting and demotivating, especially if it's given to someone after they've expended a lot of discretionary effort on something. I promise you, every single one of your employees wants you to give them a reason to show up to work other than a paycheck. People just want to know the work they're doing matters. They're not hungry for vapid praise. They want guidance and feedback about whether the work they're doing is valued by the team and is making an impact on the business. There's an important difference between praise and recognition. Praise can be nice, but it's generic. It's not specific about a person's actions, while recognition is feedback about a person's behavior. Recognition should contain detailed observations about performance, which brings us to our first best practice, which is recognition should capture in a really specific way why an exhibited behavior deserves to be recognized and what the impact was. The more specific a recognition is, the stronger the emotional impact will be on the receiver and their performance, and the more clarity it will provide other employees about what types of behavior is valuable. So as far as the totally misguided sentiment that too much recognition will serve to devalue it or desensitize people, there is literally not one study that exists spanning from 70 years of child psychology or performance management that shows there is such a thing as too much recognition. As long as recognition is authentic and is done with enough specificity, more recognition will always equate to better performance. So if there's one thing you take away from this whole discussion, please let this be it. Recognition doesn't work unless it's frequent. In fact, nothing in life works unless it's regular. Training a dog, learning a new language, you would never expect bodily transformation after working out 4 times a year, and recognition is no different. In order to have a sustaining, lasting impact on culture and engagement, recognition must be frequent. And I'm sorry to break it to you, but the benefits of recognition are a lot shorter lived than leaders assumed 15 years ago. When you look at what happens in the brain when someone receives a recognition, there's a little hit of dopamine that immediately energizes us and gives us this emotional high that contributes to improved performance and a sense of belonging, but poof, it's gone very quickly. recognition is a short-term need that must be satisfied on an ongoing basis. And we're going to spend some time kind of breaking down how frequent is frequent enough. But first, I want to ask our from day one friends to pause for a second and think about how often the average employee at your organization is recognized over the course of a year. Kristen, you can go ahead and trigger that poll. It should be popping up. And you can just give us your best guesstimate. On average, how often are your employees being recognized in a year? Would you say that the average employee receives 4 or less recognitions, or on average, are employees receiving maybe 5 to 9 recognitions? Or maybe you already have a strong culture of appreciation and you're averaging 10 or more recognitions per employee per year. Or maybe you just don't know, or you don't feel like guessing, or it's not your area of the business and you're just not sure. We'll give it a moment. What do you think, Matt? Should we do a countdown? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's check it out. What'd you say? Okay, over half are in the 4 per year kind of category, which is not surprising at all. Matt, does this surprise you? Tell us what 20 years of historical benchmarks reveal about how often employees should be recognized in order to move the needle on engagement and impact culture.
Yeah, so Brie, this isn't surprising me at all because, every customer that we've ever spoken to and we've launched a program with either never measured recognition frequency, or we're very much under the 4 recognitions per year mark with a very sort of more of an ad hoc approach. So before I answer though about your question about what the data tells us, I wanted to just clarify that, when we're talking about benchmarks, we're reflecting data from over 350 customers that are located in 150 different countries. And although there are regional nuances, one thing that we've consistently found is that our best performing customers, when you're looking at really that return on investment, average approximately 1 recognition per employee every 30 days. And I know if you're coming from an environment where you're either not measuring this or it's below that 4 recognitions per year, that may sound like a lot. We get that. But getting, this level of recognition frequency happening at the cultural level isn't something that just happens right out of the gate. We strive with our customers to hit that benchmark of 1 recognition per employee per month within about 6 months of launching the program. And we'll talk a lot in detail about how to get there. But it's important to know that that's really just the benchmark. And there are many, many clients and many organizations worldwide that are well above that benchmark as well.
Yeah, and a few quick examples that I just kind of put into the live chat. So Kellogg's, prior to launching with Achievers, their engagement survey showed that only 5% of their 30,000 employee base felt appreciated. Now the average employee is recognized more than 3 times a month. There's more like a podcast and a webinar that Matt recently did with the VP of Total Rewards, where they kind of discussed their journey deploying these best practices that we're talking about today. Back in 2015, when we first were in initial discussions with Bay Health, if we had said to their leadership team, there will be a time when 97% of all your leaders will voluntarily, on their own accord, use your recognition program every month, and your average employee will receive 4 recognitions a year, they would have laughed their heads off, or like at least not believed us. But now they're blowing our benchmarks out of the water. Meijer is a grocery chain with about 70,000 employees, and the fact that their average employee is receiving almost 8 recognitions a month is remarkable, because these are almost purely offline employees who aren't in front of computers all day. And Matt, we could go on and on with examples like this from customers from literally every sector. But the point is, our benchmark of 1 recognition per employee per month is totally doable. Like, the playbook exists to get there, but it does require demystifying the next 2 myths. The first having to do with the seemingly innocuous assumption that it's solely leadership's job to recognize employees. And like the burden of rallying and inspiring people around the mission and values of the organizations should just fall on leadership's shoulders. Of course, leaders have a vital role to play in building a culture of appreciation, but the notion that it should be just leaders and managers alone responsible for recognition is absolutely nuts, because the reality of the situation is that even when managers are in the same physical location as their team, at best, they can have 30% visibility into the work being done. Leaders have even less line of sight. And I know I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, but I have to go there anyway. Plastering your values across a wall doesn't do anything to bring those values to life or give them meaning. Talking about your values during a town hall is nice, but it doesn't infuse them into people's daily behaviors. The only mechanism that exists to truly integrate your values into the flow of work for employees and systematically enable them to see the link between their daily contributions and the bigger picture is through values-based recognition that's multi-directional and democratized, meaning it can't be just top-down. Recognition should flow freely from the bottom up and side to side and all directions, with a special emphasis on peer-to-peer recognition, because leaders and managers simply can't do it alone. In order to reach optimal levels of recognition, businesses have to enlist the help of frontline employees. The people at your organization who have the highest levels of visibility into the work being done are the best ones to call it out. Which brings us to best practice 4, which entails accepting the reality that teams are going to continue to be hybrid and spread out across time zones and locations, and making recognition inclusive has never been more important. Employees should have visibility into the good work being done across the business, regardless of their function or location, whether they work nights or days. And having this kind of transparent component to recognition not only serves to amplify wins across the business and provide examples of what your values and action look like, but it also helps communicate to employees what types of behavior leadership and the business wants to see more of.
Yeah, definitely. Brie, I'd just like to add that we have a what we think is a very unique feature called Boost in the platform, which allows managers to double down on the peer level recognition happening around them. And it actually gives them the ability to sort of attach a unique message and a monetary value to something that was sent by another individual. A number of our clients, as we kind of touched on at the top of the session, have gone through some really challenging times with COVID and substantial layoffs, pretty devastating impacts to morale. And as a result, or one of the things that we've kind of seen an uptick of is that managers and even senior executives are boosting more recognition. And they're also adding on more public comments and really sort of underscoring and clarifying why a particular behavior that's being recognized is exemplary.
Yeah, the saying goes is what gets recognized gets repeated, but what gets recognized, especially in a public way by the boss, really gets repeated. And one of our longtime customers, Christus Health, totally gets this and has leveraged this insight to help improve their business in some creative ways. One thing they've done to kind of cultivate a see something, say something culture that prioritizes the health and safety of their patients within their hospitals is by recognizing associates that report near misses, and kind of publicly celebrating when something almost went wrong. Not only destigmatizes mistakes and promotes psychological safety, but it really encourages everyone to kind of exemplify that core value of, if you see something, say something, and just having that transparent element to those recognition moments. They saw a 6-fold rise in near miss reporting, which is amazing. Now, it's time to poke a hole in myth number 3, which actually might be the number one thing that hinders healthy recognition frequency. And it has to do with the assumption that rewards are the best motivator. Now, although there are ways to leverage rewards and incentives to drive some types of short-term behavior, when you look at the literature on employee motivation and performance, it's clear that the use case is limited. Although fair compensation is a really critical component of total rewards strategy, it's also more of a hygiene factor, meaning once an employee reaches a certain threshold of income, then intrinsic motivators such as public acknowledgement become much more powerful. And the organizations with the strongest recognition cultures have caught on to this, the fact that motivating employees through intrinsic rewards has a pretty weak exchange rate with the modern workforce, especially knowledge worker. And it tends to create a culture of entitlement where employees feel expectant of rewards or even resentful if the reward amount they were given wasn't equivalent to their perception of their contribution. It is impossible to reach optimal levels of recognition frequency and truly foster a culture of appreciation without decoupling rewards from recognition. So they're seen in the eyes of employees as being separate. If the end goal is to align employees around key behaviors and have a sustaining impact on engagement, you got to get on board with best practice 5 and anchor your recognition strategy around genuine and specific non-monetary recognition. Studies show that as long as recognition is authentic and specific, the emotional experience of receiving a social recognition is similar to being rewarded cash. This is an analysis Matt's team did actually for a pharmaceutical client we have with about 200,000 employees. And it highlights how powerful non-monetary recognition can be if it's done correctly. We found that employees who received just one social recognition per month were 43% more engaged than those who didn't. And Matt, obviously analyzing the impact that non-monetary recognition can have on engagement and by extension performance has been a huge focus of ours over the last 8 years especially. I'd love for you to tell us some of the key findings we've uncovered within our customer data set and kind of like what have we learned about our experience with piloting social only recognition programs that have like zero reward.
Yeah, for sure, Brie. So our analytics teams, along with, as we mentioned before, the Achievers Workforce Institute, have analyzed literally millions of data points around this. So there was about a 2 or 3 year period where we were really testing out a hypothesis around whether we could build a successful recognition program with purely non-monetary social recognition, as we call it. And although we definitely did see some success, when we looked at the data set as a whole, we found that these non-monetary programs struggled a little bit more to meet our recommended benchmarks. And ultimately, the big lesson that we learned was that non-monetary programs can be successful under the right conditions, meaning as long as you're fully bought in with the best practices for all of our program health drivers, strong executive support, well thought out communication campaign strategy, it can definitely work. But since it's not always the case that you have all of these pieces in place at the same time, we generally recommend a blended approach now with this sort of mixture of monetary and non-monetary recognitions, but definitely with a focus on lower reward amounts and leading with the non-monetary recognition, because that is really what's important. And then, mostly our recommendation now strives to hit a benchmark of about 50% non-monetary recognition within the usage on the program.
Yeah, it's like in a perfect world, like all of our clients would diligently follow all of the items listed in our playbook, but that's just not always the case, because we can't count on the stars aligning perfectly. So taking a blended approach with targeting 50% non-monetary and some rewards is the best way to go. Woo! Speaking of way to go, we are about halfway done. The time is flying by. So far, we've covered 5 best practices all of our best performing customers employ to build strong cultures of recognition. Although all of these are important, I can't stress enough that the most common and most costly mistake organizations make is that they fail to see the importance of recognition frequency. The rest of these best practices, like, I can't say that they don't matter, but it's like if employees aren't being recognized at least once a month, it's just, you can't get to optimal levels of recognition frequency unless if you are democratizing your recognition program and really paying attention to peer-to-peer recognition and that non-monetary recognition. That being said, it would be an oversimplification to say that these all can be deployed in a vacuum and just inherently work. So Matt, I'd love for you to talk a little more about the change management process and give us your thoughts on how customers who have really seen transformative results to their business approach it differently. Like, how can you go from receiving, less than 4 recognitions per employee per year to over 50 or over 70?
Yeah, for sure. Another great question. So as with all things, getting widespread support like that and that level of alignment is definitely a process. None of these sort of behavioral or cultural shifts ever happened overnight for any organization that we partnered with. And we really coined the phrase, the journey requires a crawl, walk, and then run approach to get going. But some of the key components that we know really drive overall program usage is having this focus on ongoing communications and a campaign strategy that targets everyone from your employees, your frontline managers, and to your executives. And we've sort of broken it down that we recommend at least 4 campaigns a year. Some of our customers elect to do much more than that. But, it's finding that balance that's really, really key. So some of the challenges that we kind of hear from the HR practitioners that we work with are that recognition is really just one part of their role, and there isn't always the time and the resources available to, coming up with frequent dedicated campaigns to fostering this culture of recognition. So that's where, again, as a services leader, our team really steps in and focuses on building this out in service of our customers so that executing campaigns is really a light lift as possible. So when somebody signs up with us and they want to take this journey, they're very much assigned a dedicated customer success manager from our team who is responsible to ensure that these best practices are brought forward, that all of the tools and resources are continuously deployed, and that something like an ongoing communication strategy using our content is a real big part of that.
Yeah, and one of the things I love that the customer campaign team does each year is they release this campaign book that contains turnkey campaigns for almost every single major holiday or every workplace event that you can think of that our clients can just choose from, like drag and drop, or they can customize them. And as a way to express our appreciation for all of you for taking the time to be here with us today, we're giving away a mini booklet of 36 pre-designed campaigns that you can use to celebrate with your employees. You can forward it to your internal comms team. I think Matt's going to be dropping that bad boy in the chat, but we have some fun seasonal based recognition campaigns, like for summer, which is it technically summer? I'm not sure. I think it is fall. We have some really great DE and I based campaigns, such as Stop Asian Hate, and for Pride Month, which is this month, starting today, or no, I forget what date it is, but basically they all come with instructions on how to use them. They can be printed as physical posters or email banners, or you can embed them into your internet page. Please check those out and let us know what you think. Now, before we plow ahead to our second to last myth, I want to clarify that although we've hopefully made it abundantly clear that emphasizing non-monetary recognition is a really important best practice, that's not to say that meaningful rewards aren't important. But the reality is that with how diverse and unique every employee population is, it's impossible for HR or managers to select rewards that are going to be meaningful for everyone, which is why best practice 7 has to do with empowering employees to choose their own rewards. And I'm not talking about in the form of cash. There are a couple of ways to do this. At Achievers, we've built out an extremely robust online catalog. This is a live view of what it looks like. And the way it works is as employees get recognized for different things, such as spot bonus awards or years of service or peer-to-peer recognition, they kind of accumulate points, which have a monetary value, which can be redeemed for pretty much anything you can imagine within an online shopping environment. A really popular feature of the catalog is called our White Glove Concierge Service, which allows employees to redeem for custom rewards. One employee redeemed for her dream dog. This is literally a picture of her on this slide. Shortly after she got her, she's much chunkier now. Her name's Violet. And on a more personal note, a couple of years ago, before I joined Achievers, I was having like this really serious conversation with my stepdad about the meaning of life. And he kind of talked about the fact that the only thing he hadn't done in life that he cared about was diving the Great Barrier Reef. And in a wild twist of events, a few months after we had that conversation, he was killed in a fire. So when Achievers sent me out to Australia to do some training with our offices out there, I contacted the concierge service and was able to dive the Great Barrier Reef for 3 days in his honor. And it was just such a beautiful experience. He would have been just so proud of the fact I was able to tribute him, because the people I work with recognized me, hundreds of times for me doing my part to help Achievers, kind of get our mission, which is to change the way the world works. And it doesn't matter like what happens in my career or if I ever leave Achievers, I'll always carry that with me. And I'll always be so humbled and thankful for the people I work with for making that happen.
Yeah, it's a really touching story, Brie. I know I've heard you tell it now a couple of times, but it is so important because it's just a great way to underscore the fact these days that, definitely on a generational level too, people value experiences over things, right? And although the biggest value often is in that journey that people have when they are being recognized for the great work that they're doing. This is a great example of how meaningful rewards can be so impactful. And I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think any of us think it's reasonable to expect that an HR professional team can create these types of meaningful experiences for each employee within the organization. Right. So that's really why, we feel strongly that employees have to be given the freedom, right, to choose their own rewards so that you can make these types of connections.
Exactly. HR has been forced to take on more and more hats over this last year, but mind reader and gift giver shouldn't be added to the list. Now, shifting gears to our fourth myth about recognition, and boy, I get really fired up about this one, Matt. It's the myth of no time. Our managers just don't have time. Busyness is by far the most common excuse for not expressing gratitude. But the fact of the matter is, it shouldn't take hardly any time at all if you are following best practice 8 and ensuring that access and the process of sending a recognition is simple and easy and in the flow of work for employees. A few basic recommendations we always make include, first and foremost, it's 2021. Recognition programs should be mobile enabled and access should be frictionless as possible. At baseline, we always recommend single sign-on and HRIS integration, but our best performing customers take our advice to think more broadly about how we can capture employees in the flow of work and embed recognition in the tools and systems that they live and breathe in, building out free kind of turnkey integrations for applications like Outlook, Zoom, and Slack has been a big focus of ours over the last 10 years, because we know that the more barriers we remove for recognitions to flow freely, the better. But beyond making the recognition process super simple and easy, HR needs to educate managers and leaders about the fact that the benefits of recognition far outweigh those of any other management practice. You have to help leaders understand that them taking a little bit of time to communicate to their people which behaviors they find the most valuable helps the business amplify more of those behaviors. HR has to shift the perception within the organization, especially with senior leaders, that recognition is it's not a productivity suck. It's like the number one thing that they can do to make multiply productivity. And yeah, Matt, you know a lot about manager participation.
Yeah, I mean, manager participation is really one of our core best practices for sure. Again, if you look at the data, there's this consistent link between how often a manager is recognizing their team and then the team level of engagement associated with that as well as being measured. So if you go to the next slide, Brie, we've done some studies like this one here, which is a bit of a chart just showing that we did some analysis with a large technology company that we work with, and we mapped managers' performance ratings against their recognition activity. And what's really interesting there is you found that managers who exceeded expectations on the performance side sent 39% more recognition than managers who simply met expectations. And in the next slide, you can actually see this is another one. This is in retail this time instead of technology, but here we saw locations that where managers were sending 1.8 times more recognition than the average. Those stores in turn had 40% less turnover. So circulating these types of actionable insights can be really helpful, when trying to secure manager buy-in, and they can really end up seeing how recognition can save them time and save them effort in terms of getting their jobs done on a daily basis.
Exactly. It really does just come down to bridging that knowledge gap through regular training and circulating these, these wins. Okay, the time has come, people, to address the final myth about recognition. And I know this is a little controversial, but too many HR leaders assume that the ultimate measure of success of a recognition program should be whether employees feel recognized or not. And recognition related indicators are extremely valuable in terms of, how your recognition program is performing. But there's a really important distinction between measures of success within a recognition program itself and metrics within HR and what success looks like from a broader business perspective. Matt, would love for you to talk to us a little about how we help the HR leaders we work with to broaden their perspective about how the success of a recognition program should be measured in a more strategic way.
Yeah, I love this. So completely to your point, Brie, we partner very closely with customers to track and work to continuously improve program usage metrics, right? This is really important when you're establishing new behaviors and then seeing how those new behaviors ultimately translate into cultural shift. And then eventually what you want to do is how to look at how these contributions work against your broader business goals. A big focus area for us really is helping our customers measure and capture the story around how recognition is impacting not just things like employee engagement levels, but business metrics that fall outside of the traditional HR spectrum, such as customer service scores, for example, or safety metrics, or profitability, sales results. And we found that when you are talking to the C-suite and for them to be bought in on a continuous basis, it's necessary to capture and help articulate these measures of success, because that's going to resonate more directly and will also help secure buy-in to keep it top of mind.
Absolutely. So the final best practice is that the success of a recognition program should be also measured in business outcomes, because the reality is that even when businesses aren't running lean, continuing to secure funding and widespread cross-functional support requires articulating the business case in a really clear way that demonstrates the dollars and cents of why recognition is critical to help with the business's strategic priorities. A few quick examples before we wrap it up. DuPont is a chemical manufacturer, customers of ours, and like all manufacturing companies, they're very concerned about maintaining a safe environment and kind of keeping costs from accidents down. And the thing I love about the DuPont story is that their employee base is very blue collar, and it's made up of a lot of like men that you wouldn't suspect necessarily would, kind of be embracing all this feel good, fluffy recognition stuff. But till this day, they're at 95% adoption. The average employee receives over 3 recognition per month. And just by increasing the visibility of those celebratory moments when employees were demonstrating safe behaviors, in 1 year alone, they improved their safety record by 68%, which they estimated saved them over $1.7 million. Another cool example comes from a telecom customer of ours that has a pretty big employee population of call center workers. And like all service-based companies, customer service and kind of upsells are really critical predictors of their business success. And they measure customer satisfaction in something called Net Promoter Score, or NPS. Like basically customers get off the phone with a rep and they're asked like, hey, how satisfied were you with that interaction on a scale of 1 to 10? And what we basically did is we ran this 6-week campaign to try and see how we could influence customer satisfaction scores and the number of product upsells for basically like phone insurance. And what we did is at the end of the week, we'd pull a report kind of capturing how many upsells each rep got and how many times each rep received like a high NPS or Net Promoter Score, and a recognition was posted to the news feed that we made it look like it came from the head of that department. And at the end of the campaign, NPS increased 18 points, and like weirdly enough, like rose to like 48 points even after we stopped the campaign. And the sales of their device protection plans increased by 93%, which translated into about $330,000, which isn't like a huge amount of money for like this big of a company. But the thing I love about this example is they already had an incentive plan in place to reward employees when they got a high NPS score or when they made an upsell, but it was done through their direct deposit. So at the end of the quarter, they would get this like lump sum that like got muddled up with all their other pay. And so the fact that they saw such a stark change in behavior, I think, can be attributed to not just the timeliness of the recognition, but the fact that it was so transparent and like all their peers and their boss could see that they were crushing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these examples. Thanks for doing such a great job articulating them, Brie. I'll just mention that, not all of the work that we do has, such a easily sensational ROI component. Stories like this one are definitely the best case scenario, and that's what we're always working on. But not all organizations are at the level of sophistication where you're thinking about how you can measure how your people strategy is impacting broader business goals. And for us, that's totally okay, right? When we are able to work with customers to get a commitment and to partner on this type of strategic recognition, it's really cool to see the results, and it's super helpful for articulating a compelling business case that gets senior leaders excited about the recognition and the broader business strategy when you can sort of tie it all together like this.
Yeah, you're totally right. Illustrating that link between recognition and metrics outside of HR is certainly an aspirational best practice, and not all of the companies that we partner with are in a place in their journeys where thinking about how culture initiatives translate into dollar and cents, like not everyone's there, which is why we call it a crawl, walk, run. But it's really cool when it happens, and it's just like the best way to garner executive support. So I sure hope you don't feel like this, because we have covered a lot of information, but please don't go just yet, because we're going to quickly summarize some key takeaways. We kind of opened up talking about the fact that although the pandemic has created conditions that has greatly altered where and how work gets done, our basic wirings as humans remains the same. And in order for employees to do the best work of their lives at the most fundamental level, they have to feel valued. And we slayed the top 5 recognition myths that hold companies back. We unpacked 10 of the best practices that lead to world-class recognition programs. I'm not going to read each one to you, but I will say, if there's one thing you take away from this conversation, please remember that recognition doesn't work unless it's frequent. A few times a year won't cut it. And you can't get there without decoupling rewards from recognition and leading with authentic, non-monetary recognition that involves everyone. So please be a hero. Take a few moments to reflect on, like where the biggest gaps are within your organization, and talk to your boss. Please check out the campaign book and let me know if you have any feedback or questions about it. And last but not least, please, if you can, give us 30 more seconds of your time and let us know what you thought about today's program by filling out the survey we're going to put in the chat. Please follow me on LinkedIn. Let me know what you thought of today. Gosh, Steve, we have 2 whole minutes for you to close it up. Matt, I also wanted to thank you, my friend. Thank you for being with us today and sharing all your wonderful insights. You're such an amazing leader and person and friend. Steve,
Hi,
how's it
Brie.
going? Hi.
Good,
Sorry for all the
thanks.
clunkiness in the beginning. I was like, ah.
Oh, it all came together nicely. You know what? I always appreciate when working with Achievers that we are a global webinar spanning the border between the US and Canada. So our two neighbors. So thank you both. That was a great conversation about how to help people feel valued and really appreciated. Want to thank our sponsor, Achievers, and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. I'll mention a couple of them. On Tuesday, June 8th, Mind the Gap, which means understanding and closing the future skills gap to build the workforce of the future. On Thursday, June 10th, breaking down barriers to build a more diverse tech workforce. And on Wednesday, June 16th, we'll be doing our monthly full-scale virtual conference with panel discussions, workshops, and networking. The focus is on the new benefits that employees need and want today. Visit our website at fromday1.co to learn more. So thanks everyone for participating today. Stay well.